up, everybody? Thank you all for coming. Obviously, Tyler's here. He's going to be our moderator. We got Eric Tyler and Garrett Gordon also here, both obviously certified instructors that work for me. Again, my name is Chaz Pivot. If you don't know who I am and you're on this call, that's a little surprising. First off, I'd like to thank all of you for getting certified. You know, one of the reasons that we decided to put this program together is I think there was a lot of like confusion and maybe misunderstanding about what the Rebels Rack really does and how to use it, especially in group settings, or if you're a parent, or if you're a Little League coach or a middle school coach. You know, what if you're a private instructor? There's a lot of ways to introduce this stuff and a lot of different ways people could use it. And I just really wanted to make sure that everybody had the best understanding possible of how we use the rack on a day-to-day basis, and how and we need to have an understanding of how you use the rack based on the level of play that your players and the age of your players. Okay, so really what we want to do at first is, I know Garrett and Eric want to tell kind of their journeys as to how they, you know, heard about Baseball Rebellion, found out about the rack, what their initial thoughts of the rack were. Eric's story is kind of funny about that. And hopefully he'll tell it as bluntly as he tells me about it. But, you know, the bottom line is it's such an amazing product and system. But if you just have the product and don't understand how to use it, you know, it's just a $74 paperweight. So we want to make sure that you guys are using the product properly and getting the most out of the system so that your hitters can benefit regardless of what style of hitting coach you are and what you teach. So I'll kind of turn it over to Eric first, and then I'll let Garrett do his thing, and I'll just listen.
Yeah, cool. So I'm Eric Tyler. For those that don't know me or haven't seen anything, I played at East Carolina University, and after playing at ECU, I spent a semester there as an assistant coach and then joined Baseball Rebellion in December of that year. It is a funny story. I always enjoyed telling it, and I always enjoyed telling it to Chaz. So basically the way it goes, the first time I ever saw a Rebels rack was after my freshman year at East Carolina. I had just finished a career year of hitting 183 with more strikeouts than hits. So I was really stroking it at the time. And I went to play summer ball in Lake Norman. And on my summer ball team, one of our guys named Joe Bertone had a Rebels rack. And after asking him and watching him use it, I was like, oh, sweet. That's probably the dumbest thing I've ever seen, and has to be the most gimmicky tool I've ever seen. Now, I'm a big golf fan, and I like the movie 10 Cup, and I thought he just looked like the Kevin Costner in that movie with the 17 different things on. So I thought it was a huge gimmick. Little did I know that guy was going to go on and hit 3-hole fours the entire summer and lead the team. And batting average, home runs, doubles, anything that had to do with hitting, he was our best on the team. And so basically after that, I had to take a deep dive into why I was hitting 183 and then 200 something the next year, and started research and started looking. It started to make more sense. And then after I got to Baseball Rebellion, I then realized, oh, this is a place that sells the rack. And so began to dive into that more. And, you know, really from the first time I saw it put in use, it became much more than the gimmicky tool that an outsider might see it as. The benefits it provides, whether it be posture-wise or just understanding how to rotate. I can't tell you how many times I thought about, you know, get my hands out or whatever, you know, the generic teaching that had me hitting in the low 200s. But being able to see, really the selling point for me on the rack was being able to see, really for almost 3 years now, every single, you know, hitter, boy, girl, teenager, adult, youth player, 8-year-old, whoever it is, be able to put this rack on and be instructed, and really within 40 minutes of instruction, be able to hit the ball harder and farther every single time. And I know it sounds like a sales pitch, but every single time is not a lie. And every single time it's within the first 2 lessons. And really the selling point and the buy-in automatically comes from the you can see it in the player and the parent's face. As soon as it happens, it's like, how did you do this with this red bar? And then they go on and they don't ever put the red bar down. And so Really, for me, it's a funny story. Like I like telling Chaz, like I thought it was a gimmicky tool, and then I saw it put into use with thousands of people now. That sounds crazy. I feel like I just started, but thousands of people. And like I said, when taught correctly and when used correctly, there is no better tool to teach sequencing and rotation to your hitters. And that's something that whether you think swing up, down, flat, whatever you think, leg kick, no stride, heel up, heel down, anything, every one of your hitters needs to rotate, and every one of your hitters needs to rotate in sequence. And there's no better utility to use than that.
Well, Eric, I appreciate you telling that story. It's always awesome to hear one of my own guys think it was a gimmick. It's always a great word. No, but the other funny story from Eric was when he went on his interview. He came on his interview, and the first thing I made him do was paint a wall, first of all, on his job interview. So that was obviously a little weird. But so he goes through the teaching stuff, and he went out to dinner. I don't even remember who you went to dinner with, but it wasn't me, because I never have people on the interviews come to dinner with me because I feel like they might not say or ask a question they want to. And he was like, "Okay, guys, like, so what else is there?" And the guys that he was at dinner with were like, "What are you talking about?" He was like, "So it can't just be the rack." And they're like, "No, that's it. That's what you need to know. You need to know that front, back, sideways, inside out." And he was like, "Really?" So he ends up working here, and now he's seeing what he's seeing. And now Garrett was another interesting guy. We were looking for somebody to hire, and had gotten some applications and interviewed a couple people on the phone, and we weren't really finding the people that we wanted to find at that point. And this pro guy comes in. He's a former first rounder, and he's kind of an indie ball guy now. And, he's a guy that had power. So power wasn't an issue for him. But even he still came in and hit the ball harder and farther almost immediately with his tiny little bat. I still don't know why he swings that bat, but whatever. And so we realized from being around Garrett for that little amount of time, like, yeah, this guy's a good dude. He might be who we're looking for. And he was a facility guy up in Michigan, and he probably thought he did what we did when he came down, and he found out that he wanted to change what he's doing. So Garrett, why don't you take it from there?
Yeah, so I'm from Michigan. Not really the best state for baseball or anything like that due to weather and everything. So it's not as serious as I've come to find out here in the South. But to really just kind of put things together, I was doing lessons out of this facility. I had a pretty decent clientele base, and I always would say you got to turn to the ball, and and some other things that we talk about. But the main thing that really kind of stuck with me is, the mirror work that we started to do at Baseball Rebellion, and how much I wasn't doing that on my own. So once I was introduced to the mirror work, I was like, okay, this stuff's really cool. And like Chad said, he already took a first round guy that, I played against in high school, who hit 3 home runs over my head when I was playing center field, where I didn't even have to take a step. You think this guy's already good, but then you take him, teach him how to move a little bit differently, and then you can show how consistent you can get. But in regards to, kind of what Baseball Rebellion has showed me is really the importance of posture and how you want to prepare the body as you go, to start your load and swing, and then all that kind of good stuff too. But I think a lot of it's overlooked, and I think there's a lot of, blanket statements like get your hands to the ball. And, I have an opinion on that I won't get into right now or anything, but really you have to get your hitters, like we said, whether they're young, old, just kids, older, whatever, to move differently. And that's really what Baseball Rebellion has kind of opened up my eyes to. And, now I can confidently say, any hitter that I get, hey, I'm going to help you be more consistent in the cage. And, once you kind of figure out the movements, then you can get in, the other finer details in hitting. But, I'm thankful for this opportunity, and, I'm glad we got to run with it here. Now we're over a year already, which kind of, flew by, but working, day and day, and, learning how to move and seeing what really works for hitters is really cool, especially when you get a kid who, they come in, they do their movement progression, and then they go home and practice it. And then the next time they come in and hit, like some of these kids, they'll hit the ball like 70 feet farther or 10 miles more or 10 mile an hour harder on their exit velocity. And you're just like, dang, that's just from just learning the rotation and the movements. And it's really cool to see, because I know as a player, I was with the Nationals for a little bit in the minor leagues for 2 years. The only instruction I ever got was get your hands to the ball and swing down. And that's at, the pro level. And there really was no instruction on how to move the body differently or anything. There was just, hit off the tee and try to hit the ball to the, back right side of the cage, and I never really understood that. But, what you guys are learning now and teaching to your hitters is definitely something that's definitely going to help. And I hope you're all getting results with it as well, because I know we have been for sure. So.
Well, we've got a lot of different people on this call, and a lot of you guys I know. Some of you are dads of kids that we work with. Some of you are dads of kids we used to work with. Some of you are moms of kids we work with, and some of you are Division I coaches. Some of you are facility people. What I really want to make sure that every single one of you guys know is that we are working very, very hard to make the certification accommodate all of you. And if you've followed my site or me for any amount of time, I think you've figured out over the last 10 years that this is a passion project for me. I mean, this is something that feeds my family, and a lot of people rely on the instruction to be correct because they've trusted me with their own children. I mean, I know when I look at my children's teachers and I think about the things they're learning from them, it's just as important to me that you're trusting me with your kids, or a player is trusting their career to what we're doing. So if you're a coach or a private instructor, hopefully you feel that same passion, that same calling to teaching and finding out a way to be better. I know there's some people on this call. I've been on a few calls recently, Zooms, with some people who teach differently than I do or think. And I specifically go on those Zooms to find out what they do. I'm still looking for a better way than the rack progression. And if I find it, we're going to tell you about it. We just haven't found it yet. And the willingness to share information on these calls, because they are private, they're just for certified people. And they're going to go into a place, and Tyler can correct me at the end if I'm wrong, they're going to go into the certification area. So only you can see it. So if you have a question here, you're going to get the opportunity to ask it, and it's going to be put in a forum where people who believe the same thing we believe can learn from it as well. So please ask away. I think it's very important that you do that. There's definitely some questions in the chat box. I want to make sure everyone is asking questions in the chat box. We've got 3 or 4 questions. If you like, the other way you can do it is you can raise your hand. It's also in the chat area, and you can actually speak. So if you have a question and you've typed in the chat box, that's fine, but you can raise your hand as well, and then we can let you speak. We can have like a conversation. We're here to make you guys better. We're not here for our health. We feel a pretty comfortable mastery of the rack progression. I would say Garrett and Eric and Tyler, we all feel that way. And we want you guys to feel just like we feel, and there are some instructors on this call that I would feel comfortable working at Baseball Rebellion right now and training players, because I've seen them teach. I know what they think. I know how they teach and how they relate to players. And this is that opportunity for us to kind of see what you guys do as well. So go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, so I'll be happy to answer the first question. I know right now I'm the business manager, but I also spent 2.5 years as a hitting instructor. So I want to answer Caleb's question about some video. So give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully I do this the right way. If you guys give me 1 second.
You can do it, Tyler.
Tyler, do you want me to cover another question while you look up that video?
Yeah, go ahead.
Cool, because this one stands out to me. The Loves down in the 704 asked, what is the ideal stride foot angle at landing? And I'm actually in the middle of writing an article about this. I saw an unbelievable video from Phil Mickelson and the current long drive champion. I don't know if anybody else has seen that. And they're actually discussing this topic and the front foot's use when they're trying to create the most amount of club speed while staying healthy. And Phil Mickelson was talking about how his front foot actually, he thinks of it to come off the ground so that his knee above doesn't catch the wear and tear and hurt himself. And I think that's unbelievable. One, that he's aware of that. Two, that he says when he tries to swing the club the fastest, the front leg is what he thinks about, and really driving off the front leg. He spoke about that. In another instance, just last week, I had a one-time evaluation online with the kid up north, and who landed with an extremely closed front foot and rolled across of it. And I mentioned during the evaluation that, hey, you know, this could cause some injuries down the road. And not 10 minutes after I sent the video, I got an email that was like, can we please talk on the phone? And as I called him, he said, you know, my son tore his meniscus 6 months ago, and hitting's the only thing that hurts him. And so when you look at the front foot angle, a lot of people are hesitant to want to open it because they'll think of, you know, flying open, which is, again, why the rack progression is so important and why movement work is so important. Is if you can get your players to understand that your foot doesn't have to follow your shoulder, and that the safety of them, the best ability is availability, is what matters to them. And so, you know, when it comes to answering the question, what's the ideal stride foot angle? I always, you know, in training, try to revert towards center field. But anything in fair territory with your toes pointing in fair territory is going to help you, number one, rotation wise, but two, that the health and safety of the front leg and the lower back is huge for me.
Did you get it all squared away or no?
I did, but it's going to make me restart the Zoom to get it. But what I'll do is I'm going to do a little video breakdown, not only for Caleb's question, but I know a lot of people have questions about the different cues we use. And obviously, I have a lot to say about different verbal cues that we use with the rack. So what I'm going to do is I'll do a video breakdown when we're done. And then in the morning, I'm going to send this whole recorded session out to you guys. But I'll include that video breakdown as well, just to give you guys a couple different cues with each move, because I know each hitter needs to hear something different. That's one of the things that as instructors and working with the 40 to 45 kids that we have worked with a week is you got to say the same thing in a lot of different ways. So what I'm going to do when we get done is I will break down. I've actually got Eric doing a rack turn that I'm going to break him down, just going over a couple different cues that we use with hitters for each different section of the progression.
Awesome. And then RC asked a question. He asked how often we work with switch hitters. You know, we do work with switch hitters, and I've, you know, been doing this the longest of anybody that works for me. So I'll speak up because I've worked with probably 8. Only one has remained a switch hitter as they have kind of progressed up the ranks. Switching is so hard, and the reason it's so hard is because you're expected to have a full amount of production in half the BP. You know, because there's no coach that I've ever found that lets a lefty take a full round of BP with group 1, and then the righty take a full round of BP with group 2. It's always half and half. So if you want half the production, give them half the chance to get better. So my main thing with switch hitters that I beg coaches to do is say, okay, if you're going to ask for a switch hitter to play every day, then you need to make sure that you give them everyday reps as a lefty and a righty. The rack is obviously made for, the main reason I made it was because I'm a righty thrower, lefty hitter. And so I don't turn the same direction when I hit as when I throw. So because of that, my body has a little more balance, which is nice. But I also wasn't an expert rotator in either direction. I probably didn't throw as hard as I could have or hit as hard as I could have because I didn't always rotate the same way. So the rack is a massive opportunity for you to become much more efficient in working with switch hitters. But if you're a coach or if you're an instructor, you know, if I had a switch hitter who was really, really good, they would do 2 lessons. They do a lesson righty and a lesson lefty, probably not one after another. You know, so if they have to, other than that, they're not really a switch hitter. And a lot of times these switch hitter kids, they only hit lefty a couple times a year, you know, and it's like, are you really a switch hitter if you haven't batted lefty in 2 years, but you just hit in a cage? I would say no. So there's a massive difference between, are you an actual switch hitter and are you not? And there's also a massive difference between, are you a natural righty that's trying to learn lefty, or you're a natural lefty hitter that's trying to learn righty, which is a better way to do it than the other way around, because most of your bats are going to be from your weak side if you're a natural righty who goes to a lefty. So I hope that that answered your question, to the best that it could.
Chaz, you want to briefly talk a little bit about some of the split grip stuff we have done with oppo hitter, oppo throwers?
Absolutely. One of my favorite things, Brian, you come in here. One of my favorite things working from home. Hey, how about it? One of my favorite things, come in, to do is work with opposite field or opposite thrower hitters. Okay. So if you throw right and hit left, or if you're a unicorn and you throw left, hit right, okay, because they're out there. One of the things that happens a lot is the top hand becomes very weak. And so the dominant side will pull under and make you roll, or pull down, and that forces a rollover. So what we've done is we've taken the batter's grip and we split their grip slightly. Okay, can you guys see that? So slightly, it's like a 1/4 inch. If somebody's really, really weak with that backside, maybe a 1/2 inch, but never more. And what that does is it allows the hitter to have a little bit more leverage on the bat. 100 years ago when like people like Tug McGraw played and Sticky Fingers McGillicuddy, and that's what all the baseball players were called. Like when those guys played, a lot of them hit with split grips. All right. Now they might have been coal miners in the morning and baseball players at night, but there is some value to controlling the bat with the top hand, and obviously that's what we want you to do. And when you work with a switch hitter on their off side, their non-throwing side, that's usually what's going to happen is their bottom hand's going to take over. They're going to really pull down. That's going to cause a lot of rollovers and weakness in that top hand and get you turning over. So we want to obviously fight pronation as much as we can with the top hand. We want to turn under every time as often as we can.
Garrett, Sean asked a question about our in-person lessons being 40 minutes and how much of that time is spent using the rack and how to incorporate into a team practice. You've obviously had a lot of experience as a coach, travel ball coach. So just expand on his question a little bit about how we incorporate in our 40-minute lessons and how we instruct teams how to do that.
Yeah, so in regards to, how we use the rack in the in-person lessons, that kind of depends on the kid. Usually for the most part, kids will grab the rack before the lessons even start. And if they're more of an advanced kid who's been through the program, you can kind of trust them to get their turns correct. But then sometimes kids, if it's new to them, we might spend the first 10 minutes, in front of the mirror. And then, people are like, well, we're spending this time in front of the mirror. But we're big on the mirror work, because if the hitter can see what they're actually doing versus somebody, instructing them and telling them, what they're doing, them seeing it themselves in front of the mirror is definitely going to benefit them more. So I guess we always usually start with the rack, whether some kids more than others, but we definitely go to the rack. Another thing too, if their turn breaks down in the middle of the lesson, we'll be like, hey, your strides, crazy going in, or you're not doing anything with your lower body at all. You're not hip hinging. That's when we kind of revert and go back to the mirror and kind of, show them what they need to do to, accomplish what we're here. But in regards to the team setting, if I was still coaching travel ball and, kind of going through it, what I would do is I would set up different stations. Like if you have like a Rebels rack station where it's in front of the mirrors, or mirror at the time, then you can have a different T station, then have guys going BP. But a lot of the time too, the Rebels rack in the turns, they have to be done on their own. Everybody, as an instructor, this might sound crazy coming off, but like a lot of people they come to us without, trying to get this working on their own. And what that kind of does is, they rely on us so much for information and this and that they're kind of, they're locked in with us, and they don't ever go out and try to, practice these things on their own. So in regards to the team setting, definitely you could set it up, like have a station for it. But if your kids have a Rebels rack, you got to preach to them. They have to practice it on their own. They have to spend the time, because I remember when I was playing, I never had a Rebels rack, but I always would be getting in front of the mirror with a bat and just working on my strides and really trying to understand. And the more that hitters understand that, that's when they actually make the most gains. And then tying that in with the in-person lessons as well, you get that immediate feedback, and then you have something to work on for the week. And that's kind of how we attack it.
And Sean, I'll jump in with that really quick.
Ahead,
Eric, you can go ahead.
And I was going to say too, in regards to a good amount of time per player, like I said, that's going to vary as well. But I would say try to get your players using the rack a good 10 minutes a day for sure.
Let them see.
At least 10 minutes where they're actually engaged and in front of a mirror and working on this stuff. Because if you're not working on your movements, chances are you're not going to be doing it in the cage very much.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You know, one of the things that I think that's really important is, you know, one of the most, I guess, well-known Rebels Rack certified guys we have is Tom Eller. And when he was at Hartford, there was no certification yet, you know. So, but what he did was he had racks for everybody. And he basically said, if you want to hit here, you need to master this. And you're not getting a bat in your locker till you master it. That got buy-in real fast because everybody wanted to hit, you know. And what you guys got to remember as team coaches is frankly, these people, especially if you're a college coach or if you're a college coach or you're a high school coach or a middle school coach, I mean, the power of the pen is very, very powerful. If you write them in the lineup, they get to play, and if you don't, they don't. And if you want something done a certain way, you have to allocate the time for that in practice, you know. So if you're a team practice, you got an hour and a half, how important is rotational skill training to you?
Yep.
I think it's the most important thing you can do because it can make your hitters hit and throw better, period. And it can keep them healthier. So, you know, to me, I would spend 10 minutes. If I were coaching a team, one, we would really hit, and I don't know what I would do with pitchers. But if I were coaching a team, we would do 10 minutes every day after the first week where everybody learned how to turn. So learn how to turn would be the thing. So our hitting practice first week would be, we're going to learn the progression. And as you learn the progression and your progression is checked daily, once you check off as good, you get to go hit. So if you learn the progression in 30 minutes that first day, well, then you get 5 days to hit if it's a 6-day week. Okay? So what I want to say is, you know, if you've got kids that really want to hit, well, once you show them, especially if you can measure them first and then introduce the rack, because then you'll get the buy-in. Because the numbers are the numbers. So if you're measuring them on a field, that's cool because they'll either see it not go to the fence or go to the fence more often. You know, and if you're measuring whether hit tracks or Rapsodo or a blast, any way you measure them is a good way to measure. Pocket radar, doesn't matter. Measure exit speed, then teach them progression, and then go again. They're going to hit it harder, and all of them are going to get hit harder, and you're going to get immediate buy-in.
Yeah, so I'd like to answer the next question. Brandon, you talked about, you asked, what are your thoughts on the hitter who is wide, you know, someone who has a no stride and implementing the rack progression? So the biggest thing we teach hitters when we're implementing the rack is to stay comfortable and be comfortable. So we try to really avoid changing their stride as much as possible. So if they're a guy who's a leg kick, we try to let them to have the leg kick and teach that way. If it's a guy who's a small stride, we try to teach them with a smaller stride, learn that way. Guys with no stride, one of the biggest things that I can say with that, and I'll get up to kind of explain it. So if you have a guy with a no stride, you know, somebody kind of like a Pujols or a David Wright, if you think back in the day, you know, I'm imagining I have a rack on. If I'm a no stride, I'm just kind of a heel up, heel down person. The biggest thing I can say to tell hitters is when they go heel up or they really start their load is to make sure that their hip is going out first. So what this does is it angles their spine back. It puts their head back. We always talk about keeping your back ear over your back hip. And what that then allows hitters to do is as they go to rotate, their back shoulder is able to stay under, the barrel gets on plane early, and they can work up. So hitters who are no stride, the biggest cue you can tell them is when they do, if they're a heel up, heel down person, or if they're just no movement at all, when they get into their loading phase, when they're pulling their hands back, their front hip has to work out in that direction to allow their spine to then be angled back, their head to be back, and then that lets the barrel work under. So I hope that makes sense. But the biggest thing is making sure that when they are in no stride is to make sure their front hip is working out as they load their body. So Eric, the next question talks a lot about direction, and you and I have had a lot of conversations about that. So if you want to take that question.
Yeah. First off, what's up, Bryant? And yeah, so I'll talk about direction a little bit. It's something we've dove into a ton over the past 6 to 8 months. And really something that allows the hitters for a little more adjustability and a little more time in the zone. So when you're talking about hitting, you're always talking about, you know, wanting to stay on plane for a long time to allow for the adjustability whether it be with your vision or with your bat path. And as hitters, and as same thing as golfers, hockey players, everyone, every rotational athlete has to rotate, and in which direction they do allows for adjustability. So when you're looking at hitting, you're looking at, where is the object coming from? And that's always straight ahead. And not to answer two questions at once, but that's what I'm going to do. Later, there was a question asked about when you do mirror work, do you do front or side or both? We always do it from the front, and direction is part of the reason why. Is with the mirror in front of us, it emulates what a hitter will see in the box with the ball coming from straight ahead. And a lot of directional rotation is how you cue it. And so, we want our hitters to rotate, but we want them to rotate through center field and not try to get to their pull side so much. And that's really what, we tend to see from young hitters who are super aggressive, who know the rack and know they want to hit the ball hard, is they use their front side to yank the backside through, as opposed to letting the backside of the body create the rotation. And when the backside oblique and glute and the backside engine muscles fire towards center field, it allows the barrel to stay on path longer instead of getting across. And that's really something we see when we talk about on plane. We talk about matching the plane of the pitch on the way down with the barrel. Something I've been really harping on lately is we want to be on plane with the ball east and west, just like north and south. Now, if that makes sense, of each pitch we hit as a hitter is going to come from center field. So the better we rotate towards center field and have our chest stay there, the better the barrel is able to extend if needed, to adjust that off-speed pitch.
And I'll jump in really quick. I mean, when Eric says aggressive hitters been taught a lot of pull side, what he means is hitters that I taught for years and years and years before Eric and Garrett got here. Look, I don't run away from things that I've done wrong. I mean, I love the turn. Nobody loves the turn more than me, except for nobody loves the back foot moving more than me either. But we'll get to that in a minute. But, a lot of people, I love the purity of the movement of rotation, and the rack progression came from studying, like hammer throwers and divers and gymnasts and wrestlers and boxers and, stuff like that. It didn't necessarily come from a baseball, softball point of view. And if you know anything about me and my background, I mean, I wasn't a baseball crazed kid growing up. I was a basketball player. So, I have thousands less opportunities to practice than probably most of the people even on this call. Even if you're 13 to 15 years old, you've probably played more baseball than I did. So, my thing is I wanted the purity rotation. And then Eric, JK, Tyler, Garrett, were like, hey, man, well, guys are pulling off the ball. And at first I always listen. I might snap at them a little bit, but I always listen. And I get very ornery when we talk about the progression or the rack negatively. And I know that, and I'm working on it. But the bottom line is they're right. They were right, and that's all that matters, because it's about getting it right, not being it right at Baseball Rebellion. And so I wanted to make sure that when we did the certification, a lot of directional work was involved, and the rack bat actually showed a lot of the directional flaws in our hitters as well. And that was an unintended consequence of that product and having hitters actually hit with the rack on. So yeah, I mean, that was something I wanted to say. I mean, Eric and Tyler and JK and Garrett really were on the front lines of saying, hey, we need to have hitters stay on the ball longer to the backside and backside gap, and they need to drive the ball to center field some. And they're right. There's certain times in the game where you need to stay through the ball, period. So that's why we made those changes. But driving the ball, what I think about is as a lefty, if I hit a ball backside, or if I rack turn backside, I want to drive my back shoulder to the left center field gap. If I'm slightly pull side gap, I want to go to center field. And if I'm dead pull, I want to go to right center field. And I never want to turn my back shoulder to the dugout, to the first base dugout as a righty or the third base dugout as a lefty. That causes rollover, that pulls it out of the zone, and nobody wants that. So I want beautiful, effortless, awesome, fast rotation, but I want it more north-south and into the field of play, and less east-west and hooking balls foul. We had a question that is very detailed, actually from Tim House, talking about Jack Mankin final arc. He talks a lot about top hand torque. This is where my dorkiness is really going to set in. Hey, Joe. And then Jamie Savalas is actually a friend of mine. He likes to heckle us on Twitter, though. I don't know what his deal is with that. But he's a super, generally a super mellow guy. But he's a little weird too. But he wrote a book called Positional Hitting, which I haven't read the cheat code yet, but Positional Hitting was one of the first books that I read. And I think that positional hitting really was the first time somebody got in a little bit to how the front leg can help you adjust. I thought he did that pretty well. I think that he left out some hip hinge stuff that we've put in now. And I think that if you really read positional hitting, multiple times, he was more correct, get ready for this, about how you adjust than Ted Williams was about how you adjust north-south. So I've probably read Science of Hitting 40 times. I've probably read Positional Hitting 10 times. Those are my favorite two hitting books. The Top Hand Torque with Jack Mankin is really, really interesting. What's funny about that is, as a lot of people right now would call that the snap, that's not new. It's just not correct. So we want to make sure our big muscles are swinging the bat as much as possible because that's how every powerful movement in all of sports is done. It's done with big muscles from the core and rotation around the spine if there is rotation, whether you're doing takedown, offense or defense in UFC, whether you're doing a hammer throw or a shot put, whether you're doing a baseball throw from the warning track or hitting a home run, it doesn't matter. I mean, it all comes from the same place. Your center of mass has to move fast and has to transfer that force into the ball. So I would say that Jamie Savalas' first book affected me a lot more than Jack Mankin, although I've read a lot of stuff from both of them. So basically what I want you guys to know, the main principle of movement that I believe and that we believe at Baseball Rebellion is if you accelerate more mass, if you turn more of your body, you will put more force into whatever ball you're trying to hit, whether that's a golf ball, a baseball, a softball, a tennis ball, it doesn't matter. And Tyler can vouch for that with hitting the ball 40 yards further on his drive. All of our hitters can vouch for that with how much harder they hit the ball on the hit tracks in the game. And, if you coach hitters and you really commit to the rack progression, and we know this because we have some coaches that have truly, truly committed to it. And some of these coaches are private instructors and they've done weighted bats and plyo balls and long bats and short bats, but then they put the rack in and all their people go up 6 miles an hour. And it's just like, geez, so then now they kind of skip steps a little bit, get more efficient. So, again, I hope I answered your question, Kim. That was a super detailed question. If you have more questions about that, you can email me directly, Chaz, C-H-A-S, at baseballrebellion.com. Now, Rob asked about skipping the back foot forward. Yes, there are guys that kick back and scissor. There are guys that keep the back foot sideways. When we talk about Baseball Rebellion, generally, we're talking about teaching what we believe is an optimal turn. Now, there are other ways to do it that can have success. But when you see these guys keep their back foot sideways, for instance, like Springer, if you watch him finish a swing, he has to be hypermobile in his ankle and his hip and his back hip for him to do that. And if he's not hypermobile, okay, he would be hurt doing that. Like literally he would injure himself because that's an abnormal body position. So I wouldn't tell him necessarily to change it, but if he started to have hip pain or knee pain or weakness in his groin or weakness in his lower back or tightness in somewhere, that would probably be the first place we looked is he causing this by hammering a movement pattern that is suboptimal? And as far as the scissor guys, I did a Zoom with Mr. Scissor himself, Eugene Bleeker, just the other day that some of the people that were in here right now were listening to a little bit. And, I did that because obviously I don't agree with him about the scissor, right? I mean, I see that it happens. The reason I believe scissoring happened, and you guys can speak up, Garrett, Tyler, if you think something different, but basically right-handed batters scissor the most. And they scissor because a right-handed pitcher who they face more often tends to cut the ball. Sliders, curveballs, and cut fastballs work down away from a right-handed hitter. So what happens is their head goes forward, and that puts them in more of a hockey slap shot positioning to take a swing. And obviously, if you're hitting on ice or something slippery, your back foot's going to kick out. In baseball, softball, even if we're on turf, we're hitting on something we can grip, something we can anchor into, and something we can use the better ground force reactions to keep our hips accelerating. And if your hips go faster, theoretically, your chest and shoulders can go faster, and that's kind of how the kinetic chain works. If you scissor, you're creating a false stop, a false blocking mechanism for the front hip to decelerate. And because of that, your chest can go faster. Your chest can go faster, okay? Or go sooner, I guess. See you, bud. Good night. So if your hip stops sooner in the swing, your chest accelerates sooner. So because of that, you catch the ball more out in front. So not only is your head forward and you're limiting your hip, your pelvis movement, but also you're having to reach down and away to catch the ball up front. And you're losing about this much opportunity, okay, to actually see the ball get deeper. So theoretically, I have some issues with scissoring, especially if you're left-handed, because it doesn't make any sense to kind of stop your body that way. But I understand why righties do it, and I can understand how you can find video of some of the best players in the world ever doing it, just like you can find video of them doing what we want them to do too. So we try not to cherry pick what we think and what we teach. We try to look for reasons, and a deeper head posture gives more opportunity to see the ball deeper than a scissor posture, even though a scissor posture and a scissor kickback move can work. We haven't found that it's the best way for it to work, but we wouldn't take that away from somebody necessarily if they were excellent hitters doing that. Like Stanton, for instance, when he closed himself off, he did that because he pulled across his chest really bad with his hands. He tried to fix that for 7 years. He finally said, screw it. And like a golfer, he was going to play his hook. And so instead, he let his pull across with his hands allow him to hit the ball true and keep his hand path through the middle. And that's why that worked. So I know that was a lot of words. I hope I didn't go over that too fast.
Yeah, and I'd like to answer the next question from Rob about JD Martinez, just because I'm a huge Red Sox fan. So I do a lot of research on JD and those guys. But if you watch JD Martinez early in his career, much like Stanton, he was a guy who really came down hard and then immediately came across his body for Martinez into the third base dugout. And I mean, Martinez is a really big guy. So by him trying to rotate less, he actually did help himself because he was able to kind of quote unquote throw the brakes on a little bit sooner for a guy like him and his flaws, and allowed him to stay through the ball longer. So he used to over rotate and he would hook a lot of balls and he would come down and he'd cut a lot of balls. So by him stopping his rotation sooner, he actually helped himself out. Now, a guy like JD Martinez at his size, that's going to help him out tremendously. Is that for everybody? No. Does it work for him? Yes. If he came into our building, would we change it? No. And the reason being is because, just like I alluded to in the beginning of this, every hitter needs different things. Yes, the rack progression teaches a somewhat of a blanket movement pattern, and as you guys will see and hopefully have seen, there's a lot of different cues to get there. So for him thinking resist rotation, that actually worked for him, and it does work for a lot of hitters. If you look talking about the best hitters, Mike Trout, he does a really good job of resisting rotation. I mean, he's a guy who scissor kicks on some pitches, but he also is able to, with his hand-eye coordination, hit the ball in front of most hitters. If you look at a lot of hitters across the board, not a lot of them can have the hand-eye coordination to hit the ball out as in front as much as Trout does. But then if you look at a guy like Javi Baez, who does one of the best jobs in baseball of holding an angle and keeping his head position back, his back foot skips forward and stuff like that. But as far as resisting rotation and kind of keeping his chest sideways as long as you can, I mean, that's something that's said in our cages almost on a daily basis in our lessons. And all keeping the chest sideways is Chaz and Eric and Garrett all have alluded to tonight, is making sure the barrel stays in the zone longer. Because if the chest stays sideways, the barrel is able to stay through the pitch. If the chest closes off too soon, the barrel follows, and then that's where we cut in and out of the zone. So that's where also JD's whole thing of resisting rotation comes from, is being able to stay sideways, because he was a guy early in his career who came across really, really hard.
And JD's a guy who's also had a lot of problems with staying healthy. And I think that's a lot because of how he swings. Now, he's effective and he's got guaranteed money. So with JD, for instance, I wouldn't want to change JD now because he's got 2 more years on his contract. Who cares? But or Stanton right now. He's got what, 6 years on his deal? Like, he's not getting another deal. So there's certain times where you don't change a player because what they're doing works so well. But I do think that with JD specifically, training to rotate efficiently could keep him more healthy than hitting so much. And that's one of the things I think is really misunderstood about the rotation, because like if JD Martinez came into the building, no, we wouldn't make him hit differently, but we would take him through the progression. And we would show him how to rotate efficiently and let him feel something differently so that he could maybe resist rotation even better because he knows how to do it cleaner. Instead of grinding on structure, he can do it muscularly. So, you know, and Tyler, Garrett, and Eric may disagree with what I just said, but I definitely think that you don't change what the hitter does. You show them the progression, and then if the progression is right for that hitter, it goes into their swing automatically. Just like my son, when he learned how to crawl, and he crawled everywhere, and he was really fast at crawling. When he was trying to learn to walk, he walked really slowly. So if you wanted something, he'd get back down and crawl fast, right? So JD is somebody who's had a lot of success with the scissor and blocking off and all that stuff. He's also been on the DL a lot. So what we would talk to him about specifically is, hey, man, we want you to stay more healthy. Consider this way to stay on to resist rotation instead of this, because it'll put less stress here, here, and here, just like Eric was talking about earlier before with the kid with the knee injury.
Yeah, so RC, he's got his question raised. So RC, I'm going to unmute you if you want to ask a question for everybody.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Hello. I had a few questions, which is why I really don't want to type it all out. So I hope you will appreciate in your considerations for it. The first one was breathing. I'm a big proponent about breathing swing. It's you know, you don't have a lot of you swing faster and so forth. You really didn't mention it though until the deceleration phase. So I wanted to know, is there more focus or in terms of using other tools such as even breathing mechanics as you're going through the progression with your students, or when do you actually start talking about that with the rack? The second question is more of a comment, but it'd certainly like to hear some feedback on that. And one of the biggest things that I had a hard time with was with regards to the back heel, the back foot movement. It wasn't clear between heel up, moving forward, getting underneath the hip, getting above or forward of the head, getting or even making contact in the air. It didn't really make a whole lot of sense until the very end when we started talking about point of contact with the ball. And the videos kind of supported some of that confusion. It wasn't really clear which one was more correct or not correct. And so I want to know more about where do you focus on that with individual hitters? Do you try to keep them to be the same with where that back foot is? Or is it really more or less, are they getting, you know, through the turn correctly, whether the foot is in the air, has it actually pulled forward, you know, or is it just with the heel up? So thank you. That was it.
Eric and Garrett, I don't know how much you guys know about breathing mechanics. Do either one of you have anything to say about the breathing?
You know, in regards to doing that, that was something that I kind of used to do back in the day where, you know, basically when I would, you know, load up, I would inhale, and then as I would go through my swing, I would exhale. I haven't really put much focus into that. I can see, you know, how it could kind of potentially get a hitter to maybe, you know, understand maybe timing and rhythm with their body a little bit better, maybe to try to slow things down. But that's something that we really haven't focused on, nor I really know the science behind it. But in regards to the back foot, we've all kind of talked about this before. I know Eric, we talk about it a lot. Me and Eric are roommates, actually, and we talk about this stuff all the time. But you got to understand, like, well, why does the back foot move anyways? You know, well, it's a moving because of the back hip and knee being the trigger to the swing. So what we've been doing lately in our lessons, and I know whether it's been FaceTime or, you know, in person, what we were doing is I triggered that back hip and knee to really start the swing. And you really want that back hip and knee to pull in front of the hitter's face. Now, whether that, you know, causes the back foot to move, we haven't had as much focus on that. But for some hitters that really don't really understand the rotation, getting any mass into the ball or any turn, that's when I will have some hitters maybe try to pull their back foot a little bit. But in regards to the back foot moving, you have to be careful, because if the back foot moves too far, that's going to stand the hitter up, and then they're going to have those balls where they top spin. So really, when you're teaching your hitters, I would really focus on triggering that back hip and knee to snap or pull and kind of turn underneath them, versus making the movement immediately from the back foot, where you're actually trying to keep the back foot on the ground as long as you can as you fire your back hip and knee and the rotation starts. And then when the back hip or when the back foot moves, it's just a result of the hip and knee going. That makes sense there a little bit, hopefully. Okay,
Cool.
good. All right. Eric, do you want to dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, it's funny you asked about breathing. I literally talked about it today with an online client of mine, and it's a kid who does in-person lessons with us and now has transitioned to FaceTime. So he's probably been in the program for probably 6 to 8 months, and it's something I talk about a lot in rotation, not as much as meditation before or anything like that, but during rotation. And the reason why is this was a kid who's a little undersized and had trouble decelerating, and I would see a lot of arch of his spine, in which the stomach would be poked out and the ribs would be up. And because of that posture, he wasn't able to engage his core and decelerate the rotation as well. And so we talked a lot today about exhaling with his ribs staying down. And so breathing as he pushes his ribs down. And what that allowed him to do is engage his core and stop rotation to allow the bat to go, and really create a better deceleration. So we talked a ton today about breathing and almost exhaling at contact with the thought of his ribs staying down, so that instead of hyperextending his spine and arching his back, he was able to then stay more connected and, like I said, decelerate better. And in regards to the back foot, I believe the back foot is pulled by the upper or by the middle's rotation. And so I think that's why you see it move differently for different people. People's middle of their body moves differently at different speeds. I think as long as the back foot's being acted on by something else instead of being the driver, I think you're going to get a lot more of a natural back foot movement. And so I don't really love setting targets for the back foot, because each kid's back foot's going to move differently, right? And so if they're trying to get to their foot to this point, they're going to use their back leg to drive and push forward to get to that point, as opposed to letting the rotation in the middle of their body pull the back foot forward.
Yeah, and I would tend to agree with what Eric said, and add to it, if you have a kid who's maybe a little bit less athletic, or a kid who maybe carries a little extra weight, the back foot movement is going to be the hardest thing that they deal with, because they're going to have trouble trusting their body not to fall if they are a little heavier up top, weaker in their back and their legs, or if they have a little bit less overall spatial awareness in life. Okay, so there are some drills that we do to help them feel that initially, like the lean drill series that's in the rack certification, how the bands work, that you can support somebody's upper body a little bit. But the main key is, and Eric said, I believe, I think he means, we at Baseball Rebellion believe that the core of your body pulls the pelvis, pulls the back knee, pulls the back foot. It's never a jump off the back leg. One thing I say to kids all the time is, if I were standing on your back leg, if I were standing on your back foot, just like pushing slightly on your shoe, how would you pull your leg out from under me without letting your head go forward? Or if you were stuck in a puddle of mud with your back leg, how would you pull your leg out of it? You wouldn't push your leg out of it, because then you would just slide. So what we want people to understand is, yes, we want the back foot to move, but what's much more important is, making the body stay in this kind of a position where the back knee pulls forward in front of the face, so that you're healthy with your SI joint and your body has that rotational space, as opposed to like crushing on your structure. Do we have more questions?
Guys,
The
put
book,
those books.
yeah, the books are well, the writers really are the key. So the main books that I've read are obviously The Science of Hitting by Ted Williams, and Positional Hitting by Jamie Savalos. It's in the chat so you guys can see it.
You sent that to me.
Oh, great. But you can copy and paste those for me. Well, obviously I can't work the chat, but I'm trying. But the other two people they talked about were Jack Mankin and his top hand torque idea. I don't believe he has a book, but if you Google top hand torque or Jack Mankin, you'll find it. Jamie's books usually are relatively expensive when they first come out. So his book right now is probably like $49 if I had to bet. I would find a used copy of Positional Hitting, and I'd spend my time on that if I were you. If you haven't read it, I think you should read it. So there's my free plug for Jamie. But yeah, we want to make sure that that you guys really understand the opportunity in front of you to try to teach the rotational stuff, the rotational skill work. And I'm working on a study. Tyler and the guys don't even know about this yet. Which I'm hoping to announce relatively soon with a major league team about rotational skill testing, rotational range of motion, and strength at end range and rotational speed. So I'm hoping to get that done and funded, not by us, which would be nice. But yeah, I mean, that would be really cool. And we're talking a couple PhDs involved in that. So working on it. So if we can do that, what we're going to be able to do is show the velocity of rotation and hopefully the force of rotation changes with the rack progression, as well as the strength at end range and the acceleration. And that's going to show one, rotational coordination, two, rotational skill, and three, the ability to decelerate safely, which in theory will limit injury. So all three of those things are extremely important in baseball and softball. And I think it's really going to be, if I can get that done and that's going to come out, then we will have you will have a leg up on everyone, because once that stuff gets proven, it tends to go.
So Chaz, we have another question from Rob about his son developed the habit of striding on a balance beam. You want to explain to everybody why this isn't super optimal, kind of what it means and why it's not optimal.
Yeah, so unless your son is a gymnast, that's probably not going to work out very well, because when you're on a tightrope or a wire, you're naturally in an unstable state. The human body tends to have balance side to side and forward back. So when you go to a balance beam position of the feet, right, you lose a lot of side to side balance. So because of that, your body naturally slows down. The first fear you have as a child tends to be the fear of falling. So the second you get to an unstable position side to side and your ankle mobility is the only thing keeping you up, your body just stops, because you want to be like this and you can't ever finish your rotation, right? So when you're hitting, you're actually in split stance balance. So we have front foot, back foot, right? So the balance is not like to my head to the camera in that situation. The balance is actually diagonal. So for a lefty, the balance is from the umpire to the second baseman, and to the righty, it bounces from the umpire to the shortstop. And so when you rotate, if you're on the balance beam, yes, you can lean straight back, but you have to stop your rotation. So because of that, that's negative to overall power development and barrel direction on anything but a middle pitch. So if you can stride straight, okay, what's going to happen is you can finish rotating and lean towards the back foot, towards the umpire, and you'll have a much more stable position to rotate from, which is all baseball and softball is when you're hitting. It's striding forward and rotating. That's it. So once you, if there is an article I've written called, it has to do with natural pelvis width. So if you Google natural pelvis width baseball rebellion, it'll come up, and I actually do the balance beam drill, and then I show split stance balance. Frankly, I didn't know as much about that as I know about it now, but I can promise you this. If you do any type of research into split stance balance, it's really hard to find people that really understand it. It's really find people to understand rotation out of split stance, because generally the only time you're in a split stance, if you're a wide receiver and you're running a route, or if you're in DB, but they tend to be even there. So a wide receiver getting ready to sprint forward is generally split stance, but when you're rotating in a split stance finish, you have to understand where your supports are and how that's going to work. So I hope I answered your question.
Sounds like, Chaz, you need to write an article about that for the people. But the next question, I'm going to let Eric and Garrett take this one over. Talking about explaining loading the back hip and limiting the sway back. Eric, I know you're very strong on this, especially with your younger hitters, about the sway back and how to load your back hip. So I'll let both of you guys kind of take that question over.
And real quick, we're only going to go about 5-6 more minutes, because I know we all have families and people to see. So if you have your questions, get them in quick and go from there.
Yeah, sway back's something I'm really passionate about. I think it's the number one killer in youth hitters, and it's the number one thing created for youth hitters. The more cues that they get about get back and stay back, they immediately begin to rock back. And the reason that's so bad is, you talk about hitting, you talk about one of the most important things is your vision and your timing. And those two things come together. Your timing is from your vision. And so when we're trying to track a moving object with our eyes, with our vision, the more back we go, the more space we create between our eyes and the ball. And at that point, we get a false sense of space and then a false sense of time, so that when we come back to center to make our forward move, two objects are colliding, and then we begin to lose a lot of that time. So I think the more sway back you see, the more timing issues you see. And with that, as we've talked about all night, hitting is about rotating and rotating well. And when you take your center of rotation and you move it back, you lose connection pretty quickly, and you lose the kind of the tightness and the quickness of rotation. And so being able to load in from the middle as you stride forward is extremely important for young hitters, and really hitters of all ages. In their timing is, you want to make sure you don't see the eyes sway back and create more space than's actually there to create a ton of lateness. G, you got anything?
Yeah, and I think another thing too, it comes back to getting a hitter to, be able to understand how they can disassociate their upper body from their lower body. I know a lot of times too, we'll get hitters that won't be able to internally rotate or externally rotate their pelvis, and then they really can't feel that. So having them, I'm talking about, but you want to have pretty much stationary to where you're coiling in with the hips, taking that coil forward, and then that's when everything kind of unloads and goes. So being able to get your hitters to be able to disassociate your upper body from lower body as they move forward is crucial for them to be able to understand that they got to load and coil into the hip versus having that kind of momentum. And I think it comes back to getting the hip hinge down, and then being able to understand that they can internally rotate into their back leg without having any movement back with their body. So that's kind of what we've been big on for most of our hitters.
I got a couple questions that I'm going to bang out the answers to. One was, why don't I have any information on butting on the web?
Oh no.
That question. I'm going to revoke your rack membership, your rack cert. No, I'm just kidding. We want to teach our hitters to hit, right? But obviously, you have to bunt to win a game, then you bunt to win a game. Don't tell anybody I said that. Edit that out, Tyler. But, the thing that you guys need to understand is we want our hitters to be complete hitters. We want you to move the baseball with 2 strikes and a runner on second and no outs. Okay, we don't want you to swing like an idiot with 2 strikes. We want you to understand situations. If you're down 4 and there's 2 runners on, you probably don't want to be bunting. You want to hit a double. You got to understand what's going on in the game. A strikeout and an out are the same unless they're not. That was deep. But I want you guys to understand there's some times where you have to move the ball, period. And if you don't move the ball, you lose. And so if that's bunting or hitting behind a runner, that's important. Let's see. Do I ever use the half bat in the game or when I'm doing cage work for timing. No, we generally use the rack bat with that. But if you're having guys stand in for a bullpen, I would give them an actual bat because the ball's coming at them. They got to have somewhere to protect themselves, or I give them a glove. You know, that's the other thing. If you stand into a bullpen, give them a glove. Because if you're not telling them what's coming or what the location is, and you want them to actually stand there and take a real stride, they're not going to do that if they feel exposed. At least I wouldn't. Couple more.
I'll jump in here.
Go ahead.
Tyler, can you unmute Stephen Woda? I can't see the picture he's talking about. Maybe he can screen share or describe a little.
So I see it. So think of Jack Dalton, back arch.
So back arch and the head sideways?
Correct.
So that gets to kind of what I was talking about on a point earlier of rib orientation and the flared ribs of our chest poking up and the extension of the spine versus the ribs being down and engaged in the core. And that's really the first cue I would use. And that's actually the cue I used for the kid I was talking about today, is he's very similar. Is as soon as the chest comes up and the ribs raise, then the core isn't able to be engaged. And so in order to stay over the plate, so if the core's engaged, the rotation's able to stop and hold their posture and direction. When it's not able to stop, you'll see the head go sideways to try to hold the posture over the plate. And so I would say have them breathe and exhale into the pitch with the ribs staying down and the core engaged.
All right, RC, you got your hand raised. I'm going to unmute you here, if it'll work. All right, RC.
Okay, can you hear me now? Good?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So a follow-up question. We were talking about, so my son who's in here, JP, he's an 11-year-old playing in a 12U team, but he's actually going to be transitioning to middle school, or hopefully make the middle school team. And so he's had to change bats and increase bat weights significantly in a very short period of time. It's been a challenge that I've had. Have you guys gone through that experience and have leveraged, or do you choose to leverage bands or heavier bands to the body's capabilities to help increase the speed of which they can transition easier, or do you look at something else?
Yeah, I'll answer that one for sure. Again, this is the first time, JP, first of all, can you tell me how much JP weighs? RC, can you just give me like 100 pounds or something like that? What am I looking at? 120, okay, or 100, okay. Gotcha. So, JP, I'm talking to you directly and anybody else with undersized guys as they move to the big field. Your skills with the rack will scale when you grow. So, stay with rotational skill, increase the frequency that you swing a heavy bat, okay, and increase the frequency that you do both side, opposite and swing side rotational work with resistance. If the resistance breaks down your turn skill, go lighter until you can handle heavier, okay? Kids go to the big field all the time, and this is where your size and age and playing up gets harder. That doesn't mean it's not a fight worth fighting for. And what you have to understand, JP, is that this is the first time you're going through it, and it's the 400th, 500th time we've gone through it. And almost all of our kids survive. So stay with your rack, swing a heavy bat as hard as you can, as often as you can, and stay positive. Invest in a med ball. Throw the hell out of some med balls, you know, and that's good. I mean, you're doing everything you can, but the bottom line is, JP, if you're in 6th grade, and in North Carolina, if you're in 6th grade, you can play baseball, okay? If you're in 6th grade and you're 100 pounds and you run up to an 8th grader who's failed a grade and he's in 8th grade and he's got a goatee and he's 6 foot, 200 pounds, he's probably going to get you out. Like, that's how that works, okay? I'm not saying run away from it. I'm not saying quit. I'm not saying don't try, but middle school sports is a race to puberty, and until you get some facial hair and you go through your growth spurt, you're going to be behind some guys. But I can promise you this, bro, when you go through that and you get your body weight under you with the rotational skill that you have from this, you're going to catch those guys and you're going to whoop them. And that's how that works. That happens all the time, okay? And that's not me just being nice to you because you're 11. That's the reality of the situation, okay? Because this isn't my first rodeo with an 11-year-old that's 100 pounds, okay? So stay positive and make that happen for you. Now, last question, I'm going to take this and then we're going to sign off. If you have other questions, you can email us at Chaz or Tyler or Eric or Garrett at baseballrebellion.com. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you all, honestly, for coming. The question I got was, what advice would 35-year-old Chaz tell 25-year-old Chaz about the rack? And that's a really good question. When I think back about what I taught hitting-wise when I was 25, it's really kind of hard for me because I think about some of the more talented kids I had that didn't make it. And they didn't make it, in my opinion, because I didn't allow them to make it. And that's the reality of coaching. Like, you're only as good as the knowledge you have now. And if you're not continuing to try to learn and try to get better, you've already lost. The game's already passed you by. And so it doesn't matter if you play in the big leagues, coach Division I, coach in the minors, you know, never played a day in your life. If you're still looking to learn, okay, you can be great, you know. And also the level of coaching you have, like my son has a Little League coach. I don't think he knows anything about baseball, nothing. But he's so nice to my kid. My son's 6. Like, this guy's a better coach for my 6-year-old than I ever could be. So you have to understand, like, frame your expectations as a coach for the level of athlete you have. And if I could tell myself something at 35 out of 25, honestly, I'd say kind of like the Good Will Hunting scene where Robin Williams hugs Matt Damon. He just says it's not your fault a bunch of times, and Matt Damon breaks down. Like, it wasn't my fault I didn't know about the rack. I was doing everything I knew how to do. I swear on my life, everything I knew to make these kids better, and it wasn't right and it wasn't good enough. And I deal with that. I live with that. But because of those experiences, it got me to understanding rotation and looking at the kids I had and being like, man, like, I have to do better for this because none of these kids are as big as me, as fast as me, as strong as me. How am I going to teach them what I did that failed at 22, 23? You know, like, that's absurd. So, you know, I want my athletes to enjoy baseball. And the best way to enjoy baseball or softball is to be a good hitter. Like, going 0 for 4 is awful. And going 0 for 8 is awful. And if you go 0 for 4, 0 for 10 in a weekend, and then your next weekend tournament's rained out, and then your next one is 2, you haven't gotten hit in a month. In pro ball, you haven't gotten hit in 3 days. So it's all relative. So I would tell myself, it's not your fault you didn't know. And then I would say, you need to start looking at how Mike Tyson throws a punch and learning how to rotate. Because what you're doing right now isn't it, Chief. That's what I would tell my 25-year-old self.
Well, Chaz, that's good thoughts from 35-year-old Chaz. I know it's been a couple years since you've been 35, so I'm glad you remembered those.
I was waiting for that, Tyler. I was waiting for that from you, buddy. I'll see you see a little smile right there. Can you guys see him? He was waiting for that joke the whole time.
We'll do this next year, and we can ask, what does 45-year-old Chaz have to say?
Hey! And then I'll be able to go into the future.
There it is.
Everybody's got jokes right now.
All right. Well, hey, I know I speak for everybody. We want to thank you all for joining us. This won't be the last one we do. I want to give everyone an update that in September, around the middle of September, we're going to be launching phase 2 of the RAC certification course. We're going to start filming in June, albeit we're able to get back in the building by then, which I think we will be able to. So if we can start filming back starting in June, that part 2 of the cert will drop in September for all of you guys. So we're looking forward to that. If there's anything you guys would like to see on that, please reach out to us. You know, our emails are just our first name. So TYLERGARRETTEAERICCHAS at Baseball Rebellion. So Eric, Tyler, Chaz, you can email JK. So just let us know. And I will get this uploaded to YouTube tonight, and then I will email this out to everybody tomorrow afternoon, as well as Caleb. I'm going to do that breakdown of the cues and everything, and I will send that to you guys in our email chain as well. So we thank you, and we're looking forward to the next one.
One more thing really quick. If you're Rebels Rack certified, put that in your Twitter bio. Put that in your Instagram bio. Be proud of the time you spend in this. Because if you ask us a question, and over 200 people in the last 6 weeks have got Rebels Rack certified, okay? So there's a lot of you now. I'm not going to pretend like I know everybody's name anymore because I don't, okay? Now, I happen to know a lot of the people right here, okay? But if you ask me a question on Twitter, okay? If you DM me and I click your bio and it says Rebels Rack Certified, I'm going to answer you every single time, okay? If you ask me a question on Instagram and it says Rebel Rack Certified, I'm going to answer your question every single time, okay? So help us help more people. Help us help you. Be proud of being certified and put that in your Twitter bio. Put that in your Instagram bio so we know who you are. So if you do ask us a question, we respond to you, because you have no idea how many DMs we get on a daily basis from who knows. And we try to be respectful and be friendly. But the bottom line is you're in the family. You're in the club. You're in the treehouse, okay? So if you need something from us, let us know. You know, rep your stuff. If you're proud of your certification, you believe in the training, then put it in your bio so we know who you are. And so I don't have to just remember your name from having bought 2 or 3 things from me over the years, you know. But, you know, it was really cool. You know, Jen, thanks for coming. Caleb, RC, Larry, Roderick, Todd and Cage, JP, Sean, you know, everybody that came and asked questions. I know Evan's here, Chris, Rick. I mean, it's just been great. And there's more of you. And, you know, I just am super
Look at that yellow
appreciative.
Rebels Rack.
Yeah, he's an OG. Roderick's an OG. You better believe that. Him and RJ, OGs. But the bottom line is this. I think he bought the first rack bat. I think he bought the very first rack bat. So, I mean, look, I'm going to remember certain people no matter what, okay? I'll remember Sean forever for asking that ridiculous bunting question. But my point is, I really appreciate each and every one of you. We all do. And if you can't tell that, then you ain't paying attention. So help us appreciate you even more. Put it in your bio so we know who you are. And yes, if you DM me, I'll know most of your names. But if I don't and I click, because I'm going to click on your bio first, I'm going to answer you if you got that in your bio. So be happy about it. Be proud of it. Thank you so much.